Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I just got back from seeing Matchstick Productions' Calm Beneath Castles last night at the Neptune Theater in Seattle. And man, I think I'm officially ready for winter. I really need an escape from the shit that's been going on at home more than ever. You know, my wife has been sick for 2 years, and yes, her life is really tough, and I feel so bad for her and what she's going through. And then you combine that with the problems that every relationship has, and life hasn't been easy for her. But this intro isn't about her, it's about me. And family stuff combined with doing almost everything around the house, plus doing this podcast, plus getting another job, has me going a little crazy at times. Am I happy in life right now? I won't say the answer is no, because I'm sure I've got some good things going on. I just can't think of them at the moment. I also know the answer to that question isn't yes, as these have been 2 of the hardest years of my life. But you know what? I keep plugging away because really, that's all I can do. Good news is, I have a job offer on the table, and it's one that I'm not only stoked on, but one that should allow me to keep this podcast going, and keep it as good as ever. The bad news is, with whatever job I take, I won't be as involved with the whole treatment process. But that's how most people who work full-time have to deal with issues like this. But it's a shame, because I really have been super involved. Anyways, enough about the shitty life of the Powell movement. See what I did there? And what I'm going to do here is wrap up my discussion of ski movies by saying the 3 top movies that I've seen this year are Camp Blank, Calm Beneath Castles, and The Head movie by Jeff Thomas. And that's in no order in particular. But I predict one of these is going to win IF3 Movie of the Year. But you're not here for my predictions, you're here for another great podcast, and this week delivers again. It's my second male Dana, and this one is not the famous rapper of my childhood, Dana Dane. That was years ago. This week, I have legendary hard charger Dana Flahr on the show. Dana was the man in ski movies for like a decade. A full throttle winner who sent it every year, until he didn't. Then he quietly disappeared from the scene. Dana and I talk about it all, and even though we don't see much from Dana on the big screen these days, he's still killing it on Faction Skis and brand new for this year, Phenom Boots. Before we dive deep into Dana, I want to thank Josh Lubeck for sending me another care package of Nema vitamins. I take them every day, and when I don't take them, I can feel the difference. Now, I want to ask you to do a few things for me. First, if you listen on Spotify, please star rate me there. I don't know what that does other than make me feel good, and to be honest, I really need to feel good, so please help me out there. Second, please tell a friend about the show. If you like it, your buddies will too, and word of mouth is the best way to get new listeners who will appreciate the hard work I put in knowing about the show. And finally, and most importantly, please support my incredible sponsors who make the show happen. They are Outdoor Research, Elan Skis, Thermic and Dissent, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Thanks for listening, thanks for doing these things, and now it's time to chat with Dana Flahr. You grew up in Kamloops, British Columbia, and recently you guys lost a landmark, the Red Bridge, and that thing sounded like a rite of passage for those who like to catch air. Did you spend a lot of time jumping off that thing?
Well, I've never jumped off it, but my best buddy growing up sure did. Saw him jump off it once or twice, which was pretty cool.
Oh man, was that a huge bummer to lose that? Because I mean, I saw a lot of other people posting about it where it was like a big deal to jump off that thing. Why weren't you jumping off it?
To be honest, like I never really was a big risk taker as a kid. I was just always kind of an observer and ended up falling in love with skiing out of like situational, like basically just because of the people I was hanging out with, became super into taking risks on skis. Long story short.
Okay, so normally I come up with something fun to start it out with. I thought that bridge thing could have been it. It wasn't, so I'm going to pivot to another thing. Being that you were born with the name Dana, I mean, I'm guessing that was your name from birth.
Yep.
Back when you grew up, man, there was a lot more bullying and a lot more shit that happened to kids, especially boys that had traditionally girls' names. Did you experience a lot of that when you were growing up?
No, not really. I mean, yeah, it was kind of a common answer, like, oh, isn't that a girl's name? But it was just like, I was like, no, it's not. And then it was kind of like, that was it. So it wasn't really a big deal. Kamloops is definitely a rough place to grow up, and seeing like certain things was definitely an eye-opener going into high school. But I was kind of quiet and kept it to myself, so it didn't seem to be much of an issue.
I didn't realize it was that rough of a place. Is Kamloops the tournament capital, or what was it's the capital of something there? I forget what.
Yeah, they call it tournament capital. Yeah, because it hosts all sorts of sports and all that in all seasons. But yeah, it's kind of a blue collar city, and it's like, yeah, it's got all sorts of different people, and it is definitely a little bit rough around the edges, I would have to say.
Like rough in a Surrey type of way?
No, not necessarily. More like if you're not street smart, you'll learn to be street smart very quickly. High school, for example, I grew up on the North Shore, went to elementary school, kind of like a normal sheltered style, safe life. And then for high school, which is 8th grade and onward, junior high school, I was in French. So I took the bus downtown to a French immersion high school. Yeah. So basically 45-minute bus ride. Next thing you know, it's like first day of grade 8. And within like the first week, I'm just like, holy crap, this is like a completely different world. Like crazy fights, people getting tossed over bike racks and their arms broken. Some guy got maced, all within like the first few months of my 8th grade. And it's just like really rough, kind of like it was just kind of like street rules, if people were running their mouth, like they'd have to suffer the consequences. So it was very like an eye-opening experience.
Okay. And you grew up with a single mom, and it's your little brother. And was there any contact with your dad, or was it all mom?
Yeah. Dad was in my life, but he lived fairly far away. So mom just raised me and my brother and just did the best she could kind of as a single mom.
And when you're growing up with a single mom, I'm guessing life isn't super easy like a lot of skiers. And when you think about that, is life like rich, poor, or average?
I mean, yeah, we were pretty like poor, basically, to begin with. And it was pretty hard. And she basically like did everything she could to just make sure that we were happy. And when I discovered skiing, we still hardly had any money, but she knew how much she loved it. So basically like did everything she could to just like scrape together cash to buy me some used skis. And she would ask friends for rides to get up to the mountain, which is about an hour away. Or there was a pretty cool big old yellow school bus that you pay $10 and it would pick you up and drive you all the way up there. And then it would wait and then drive you back to the pickup spot at the end of the day for $10. So that was pretty good memories there.
And what is it, Silver Star, or is it Harper Mountain, or where do you go skiing?
Sun Peaks Resort. And I grew up in a small ski hill called Harper the first year or two that I skied.
That's really close, right?
Yeah, it's pretty close to town, 25 minutes away, little family hill that has 12 runs. But I grew out of that pretty quick. And Sun Peaks had like this pretty awesome, like massive layout as far as terrain goes, especially for a 12-year-old kid, and tons of runs and even some small backcountry, which we quickly discovered. Like our group of snowboarders, it was building like awesome backcountry jumps, and we would wait until they were done the jumps, and the next day we'd go hit them ourselves, and just that's where we'd learn all our tricks. So that was super, super cool to experience.
And I think like all Canadians, did you start with hockey and then like at 9 you shifted over to skiing?
Yeah, I did. I got into hockey when I was like maybe 8 years old, and then skied and played hockey for a couple, like 4 years, I think it was. And skiing just quickly took over. As soon as I was in 8th grade, I met a bunch of other skiers that told me all about Sun Peaks, how much terrain there was. They'd show me the terrain map. That was like September, and I'm meeting all these kids that all skied this massive hill compared to what I was used to. And they brought the trail map in one day, and I was like, oh my God, this is a completely different world. Like, I need to go here. And went up to Sun Peaks and just blew my mind, and quit hockey that next year, and the rest is history.
Was it all like Sun Peaks and the terrain was amazing, and that kind of has you salivating to ski, but it's also like this whole crew becomes your social life too, and skiing becomes everything?
Yeah, totally. It started as this crew of people that I hadn't known before, and then this whole world just sort of evolved into that. And actually one of the guys, Alan Dahl, I think it was him, came up with the idea of renting a limousine for the opening day of that ski season. And like 12 of us got together, rented a limo. It picked us up at the high school. I think it was on a weekend. And it literally came to $10 each for both ways. And we went up in a limo, and it was probably like the coolest thing we could have ever done.
That is pretty amazing. And it sounds like you had some pretty remedial gear. What did you look like when you went on the hill?
Oh, like those first few years, we were just scraping it together to get equipment. I had a pair of old used like 170, which were way too long, straight Rosino skis that were all black. And then basically I just wear my mom's old Skidoo pants, which were all black with a yellow pinstripe down the side, that were like bib pants.
Okay.
And then couple sweaters with like a cheap windbreaker over top, and some peaks would get to like minus 30 or 40 a few times a year, and I would just basically wear like 2 more sweaters underneath, and I was good to go.
Was that ever weird? Like, did all your friends have really good gear and you had like shitty gear, and did they ever give you shit, or was this like how it was?
And they never gave me shit, but I always felt like, oh, these kids grew up skiing since they were 3 and their parents have money and they got like fancy Oakley goggles. And I'm like this like kind of like scrappy feeling kid. But I was just like, you know what? It doesn't even matter. Like, we just love skiing, and there was camaraderie there, and there was no materialistic kind of judgment at all.
And then you're also the only person I've had on the podcast to shred on cardboard skis. What's the story behind that?
Oh, I don't even know where you got that. To be honest, the only thing I remember about cardboard skis is I made cardboard skis for my trampoline back in the day in the summer, and that's what I practiced tricks on. But I don't think I've ever slid down.
No, well, that's what I was saying more. It's like you made your own skis, and that was your trampoline trick. Is like you would learn stuff with cardboard skis.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, it just basically made these small skis, and I was like, oh, you can actually like practice doing proper crosses and grabs and different grabs and stuff with tricks. So we made these cardboard skis and we duct taped them all up so they wouldn't bend too far and break and tear. And yeah, that was pretty funny.
And then when you think about what your skiing looked like, you're going up to Sun Peaks, and you said there was those snowboarders that had jumps, and then you would go in the back country or side country, wherever you were, and hitting those jumps. I'm guessing there's no real Avi gear at that point, no real understanding of what could go wrong. Did anything ever happen back then?
Well, yeah, I did actually get in a small avalanche, and I remember like clear as day, like it was yesterday, and I didn't even really know what an avalanche was. I'm sure I'd seen one on TV, but the first time anything had actually like fractured around me, I was skiing a fairly steep little rib for me at the time it was steep, and I remember everything just slowed right down, and it was like burnt in my memory forever. It was almost like time just stands still and everything just went into slow motion. I remember looking down and seeing the snow just fracturing around me. It was such a surreal experience. But to answer your question about the Avi gear, no, none of us had any Avi gear. We didn't know that we were supposed to do any of that, or we just basically put our skis on our shoulders and walked past the ropes, and that was it.
And even with that slide, you're just like, maybe I won't ski that line again, but you don't think about it any more than that?
Yeah, it was kind of like a pretty turning point in my mind, because in that moment, all the repercussions of what it could have been basically were just like, it was so surreal and experienced in that moment. It was like a full-on display of what the powers of the mountain could actually deliver. And so that kind of stuck in my head, and I just kept that with me from that day onward till this day, really.
As you're getting into high school, I think that's when terrain parks are starting to open up. Do you spend a lot of time in the park learning tricks, or are you spending more time in the backcountry, or how did that progress?
Well, Sun Peaks had a pretty cool little snowboard park back then, and that's what it was called, the snowboard park, because it wasn't for skiers. And my buddies and I, there was a separate group of my buddies that just sort of discovered this, and so it ended up being just the 3 of us that were super into the new school style skiing. And so we were watching the old films with the Canadian Air Force and whatnot, the Johnny D movies.
Yep.
Yeah, the Degenerates and stuff. And so we basically like started riding in the snowboard park, and we basically realized that if we were seen or like spotted riding the park, we get snowballs thrown at us. So we would basically drop into the park, hit every single jump from top to bottom, try out the tricks that we wanted, and go back to the lift and just hot lap it. Otherwise, if we stopped at a jump, they'd just be like, hey, no skiers, and they'd be throwing snowballs at us. We're like, all right, well, I guess we're just going to ski top to bottom, and they probably won't even really notice us there until it's too late. So in a way, that was super cool, because we just were riding like top to bottom laps, and they were like stopping between each jump and sitting down, and we were just banging out laps and getting a good momentum going.
That's pretty cool. And then off the hill, there's high school. And what group did you fit in? And did you do anything else outside of skiing?
I was pretty into mountain biking in the summer times. Kamloops is pretty well known for biking, and
it's like Brett Tippyville, right?
Yeah. Brett Tippy, Wade Simmons, Richie Schley. Those were the originals.
That pretty much started the sport, right?
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, he was born in Marion County, mountain biking in general, but it pioneered the freeride movement, like pretty much was born here. There's these old gravel pits that are out in Barnhartville, and they're in Crank too. They're riding the gravel pits. And yeah, we used to actually sand ski these gravel pits as well, because I saw them sand skiing it and mountain biking it. So I'd take my skis and my bike there.
What's it like slamming when you're mocking it on sand skis and you wreck? What's that like?
I mean, I haven't crashed just sand skiing. It was just like making like cool, fun GS turns down this like slope. And it was just such a fun thing to do. But luckily I did not crash.
Okay. And then I heard you got the idea to go to Whistler like while you're in high school because your mom brought you a video home from the public library. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, that's a true story. It was basically she came home from the library one day with this like VHS tape called Whistler, and I just put it in, and I think I had probably heard of it before. And then it was just all these old like historical sort of videos of clips of guys and girls like ripping the mountain. And then there's this one clip. Some guy comes down and hits the wind lip on Blackcomb, and I think he did like a double front flip or something like that. And it was like, I'm pretty sure it was a grainy, like old, high five.
High 8 thing?
Yeah, high 8 film or old 16 or super old, like probably 70s-ish. And I was like, oh my God, I'm just looking at the mountains in the background too. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to go live here as soon as I graduate high school.
So you knew all through high school that college wasn't an option and Whistler was the place you were going to land?
Yeah, pretty much like by the last 2 years of high school, 8th, 11th, and 12th grade, I saw this movie. And then that's when the progression of free skiing was really kicking in. I watched Uprising by TGR, and that was pretty life-changing. Like it was a theater in Kamloops that had the premiere. And then I think that same year I watched the premiere of Fetish, and then Sixth Sense came out. And I was just like pretty mind blown that these skiers on this film on the screen, Morrison, McConkey, they're traveling the world skiing, making ski films, making a living out of it. And I was like, okay, well, if these guys can do it, I think I'm going to have to give that a shot. So nothing else existed but skiing for me. That was where I was going, no matter what.
And when I think of you, you're not the biggest dude in the world. And you were really young when you graduated high school. Were you like a smaller kid in high school?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely kind of a skinnier guy. I'm 5'10" now. I was probably still 5'9" or 5'10" when I graduated, but yeah, 150 pounds and definitely on the lighter side, but that definitely helped for skiing and taking slams and whatnot. Not a lot of body weight to get shaken up, so it definitely helped, I think.
Thinking of you watching all the movies and stuff like that, who were the skiers that really inspired you? Like McConkey, I'm sure, is probably one of them, but when you think of the guys that you had like pictures on your wall and shit, who were they?
Yeah, well, in high school, opened my locker, I had a fisheye photo of Shane McConkey doing a backflip off a cliff. It was an old Avalanche ad. I just cut out this like epic photo and had it on my locker. And then Seth Morrison, 100%. I just loved his style, and he made it look so effortless and just like so artistic and just so in tune with his skis and his body. And it just made it look so aesthetic. So it was mainly those two guys plus JP Auclair, JF Kisson, and then those guys, Shane Zox, 100%. I just like studied Shane's front flips. He's a buddy of mine still. See, I did an epic powder day with him this year on Blackcomb. So mainly those guys, I would have to say. And then later more, there was Dan Treadway and stuff after I moved to Whistler.
Okay, and what's crazy to me is that you get the fuck out of town, it sounds like, the day high school ends. I mean, is it literally like the day it ended you moved?
It was literally the day high school ended. My buddy Shane Venables was waiting for me in his 1973 VW van out front because he was a couple years older than me. So he was like antsy to go, but he waited for me to finish high school. I finished my final exam. He had already gone to my mom's house, grabbed all my bags, and he was waiting out front of the high school. I finished the exam, walked out, got into the van, and we drove straight to Whistler.
That's so crazy. And I mean, what does your mom think when you make that move at 17 when most kids are like idiots?
Honestly, I think she was stoked because she knew how much I love skiing, and there was no spark in my eye until I had discovered this sport and this lifestyle and this way of living and being up in the mountains. So everything she did, she supported. And when I told her I was moving to Whistler, I think she was just like ecstatic because she knew I was going to have my mind blown.
And when you think of like pro skier people, it's like some have crazy personalities like the McConkeys of the world, but you were almost maybe, I won't say introverted, but you weren't as like loud and out there as some people. And in life, was skiing one of those things that really got you to break out of your shell and just be yourself?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah. Like skiing gave me, confidence in myself. And it's like, as a young kid, you're just trying to find your way. And if you're kind of quiet or shy, the world is a kind of an intimidating place. If you're just trying to just get through, if you're not like a super confident kind of jock style person in high school. And then when I discovered skiing and started like realizing that I actually had some talents at it, became everything. And by the end of 10th grade, I was like doing huge backflips and we were filming it, and my buddies would be filming with a camera that we borrowed from the high school. And we started making these little ski movies in high school, and just gave me all this confidence and just like in myself, not in an outwardly way, but in an inward way, to just had to believe in myself and just love what I do and let that sort of like push out into the world and kind of like help shape my character as a human.
So the dream when you go to Whistler is to be a pro skier. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to be a ski bum and ski every day. It's like, I'm going to progress and progress and progress, and I'm going to get sponsored, and then I'm going to be a pro skier, dude. That's kind of what was in your head at 17?
Yeah, pretty much. It was always the goal to just basically get into the ski films and travel the world making ski movies and be a skiing movie star. And so I basically just focused myself on that. And I wasn't like the ambitious guy calling every sponsor. It was more like every day I was on the mountain was like school. I was like studying, and it was like all encompassing in that way. And I knew deep down that when I was ready, the doors would open. So I just sort of put my head down and focused on skiing, and my buddies were out partying and stuff, and I never really drank. I would just be going to bed early, and I'd be just shredding every single day I could, and just honing my skills and just staying like hyper focused on the goal at hand.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and when the temperature goes nuclear cold, I don't hit the mountain without my Thermic heated socks. They are the original heated sock, and still the industry leader after 20 years. It's a total game changer. Trust me, if your feet aren't working properly because they're frozen, you're not skiing or snowboarding at your best. And I make sure that doesn't happen by always wearing my Thermic socks, and this year they're better than ever. Thermic's new Smart Elastic Technology heated socks are a world's first for heated socks. These set socks are a high-performance fitting, thin ski sock where the patented heat components have stretch rather than a big, cumbersome heat band and element. So they literally feel like you're wearing your normal favorite pair of performance socks. But if heat isn't for you, don't worry. Thermic has you covered with socks for winter with their athlete-tested and proven Dissent line of socks. Some of you might be blessed with feet that never give you issues, but most of us aren't, and that's where Dissent Labs comes in. They've engineered performance socks with the help of an elite athlete team to eliminate things like chafing and heel blisters in your boots when you're touring or splitboarding. For over a decade, the people at Dissent have been making socks that are consistently the best thing you can put on your feet before you get out there. They have a distinctive locked-on fit that never seems to change. At the end of the day, Thermic and Dissent socks are the go-to socks for people that know. Drop into your local boot fitter and retailer and you'll see what I mean. Next up, it's Elan Skis. And while I've been talking about Elan all summer, I've been keeping some information from you that I'll share today. The award-winning ski that started Elan's cult following here in the US, the Ripstick, is brand new for 24-25. Think all new molds, all new sizes, new widths, and new tech. I got to ski these skis last season, and I'll say, the new models are still lightweight, they still have a ton of pop, and they'll still make you a better skier. But these new skis are even more stable at speed, which will allow them to handle burlier terrain than ever before. While you get more out of the Ripstick collection, Elan was able to build them without making them more demanding. So Ripstick fits even more skiers than before. While I loved my original Ripstick, what I skied last year was noticeably more fun, and I know the cult of Elan is going to grow even more with this new collection. If you're a person that demos skis and you haven't tried an Elan yet, make sure you try one this year and you'll feel how fun these skis are. To find out more about all things Elan, head on over to elanskis.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, and if you haven't been hearing a lot about Stanley lately, you must be living under a rock. Sure, you used to know them for keeping your grandpa's coffee hot in that signature green bottle, and they still make that, but Stanley absolutely blew up in 2023, and everybody is still talking about them. I've been telling you about how incredible their products are at keeping your drinks hotter and colder than anyone else for 7 years now. I mean, they invented the category in 1913, and while they've always done well, the world now knows that if you don't have a Stanley, you don't have the best, and I love having the best. I personally use Stanley pint glasses every single day, and I swear by them. And my wife and so many others out there can't live without their Stanley quenchers. Recently, I've integrated Stanley food storage devices into my ski routine. Instead of buying $20 burgers at the mountain, I buy food and it stays piping hot in our Stanleys, and I end up saving at least $70 a week by not buying food. While that's cool, Stanley really has something for everyone, and you can check out all their amazing products over at stanley1913.com. Those are my sponsors. Now, let's jump back into the podcast. When you think about your crew in Whistler, who does that become, and what are you doing for money, and how's the whole setup there?
The first crew was basically just like people that I met at work. One of my first jobs doing room service at the Delta Hotel. They kind of like had been in Whistler for 3, 4, or 5 years. So they were like my first little posse that helped show me around the mountain, and then starting to discover it, and then kind of finding my own way. Shane was still there, and then we met a guy named Ryan McKeeman, and then we met Chris Turpin one of his first couple months in Whistler, and then we all ended up getting a skier house. There was like 6 of us living in this house that ended up being named the 604 house. Kind of became like a bit of an infamous skier house. And Oakley White Allen was there, Rob DeMonte. Those guys became really well-known half-pipe skiers, just doing crazy stuff, boosting so high out of the pipe. Turpin went on to be a very well-known park skier and turned pro, and we just watched him explode. He'd been skiing for 2 years, and we were like, holy crap, this guy has some skills.
He took blade skills and like made it ski skills, and then would do everything switch, it seemed like.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, he didn't have any skiing background, but he had the rollerblading background and the gymnastics. So I remember one day he's like, Dana, can you take me on a groomer and like actually show me how to turn? I was like, huh? He's like, you want to learn how to turn? I'm like, you're just doing backflips off that black jump. Okay.
That's so funny.
He's just like, and I could see that. Like I could see in a way how turning a ski and arcing a ski could actually be much more difficult than just hucking a backflip if you're completely fearless with a acrobatic background. So that was an interesting situation, but yeah, we go way back for sure.
And then when you think of Whistler these days, it's like kind of Vale North. And if you graduated high school in 2024, would you be able to do the things that you were able to do in 2000, or would you have been priced out and had to go somewhere else?
I mean, yeah, that's a great question. I think anything's possible still if you're just focused and committed, but I feel like it probably would have been harder. Everything's, so much more expensive now. I moved to Whistler with $1,000 in my bank account and made it work because like the first house I lived in, I was paying $240 a month for rent for my own room. And the job I had gave me a free ski pass. But nowadays, kid coming out of high school, like that'd be a tricky thing to do. Some bedrooms are going for, it's insane, like $1,500 or more for a bedroom. So I have definitely feeling that it would be much harder to accomplish that now.
And then when you're thinking about all the jobs that you were working, you said you worked at Delta. And then is it all like working 3 jobs in the summer, saving up your money so you don't have to work as much during the winter? Or are you still working all season as well?
Yeah, that first year I was doing mostly like bussing a bit at the restaurant in the hotel and then room service. And then I started doing a separate bussing job in the summer. And then I combined that with house painting in the summer. So I did doubles all summer long, saved enough money to buy a truck and a sled. And I believe I still worked that winter, but was able to take a little bit more time off once I started doing the free skiing competitions. And then I just kept doing those doubles for a few years, which was great because, it was pretty easy. We're just working outside, you're young and healthy and doing the painting thing. And then eventually I was just like, okay, I'm taking this winter off. I'm just going to ski. And that was it.
When you say you got your truck and your sled, it seemed like 2003 to 2005 is when Zox and everybody was getting trucks and sleds and going out to Brandywine and all the different places in Whistler. Were you part of that early crew getting out there?
No, I was kind of like second wave, I would say. The first sort of crews were like the Treetop snowboarder crew, Treetop Films.
Yep.
They were doing a lot of the exploratory stuff. Dave B. and some of the guys, Jonathan Moore. And then I think the skier side of things would have been like Shane Zox, Dan Treadway, Brian Hughes as a photographer, Damien Cromwell. They were doing it for a while, but more just focusing on stills rather than film.
Yeah.
And once I started sort of getting a name for myself, I remember getting an invite by Dan, I think it was, invited me out to go shoot photos one day. It was like an early season. It was like December 6th or something. We had a ton of snow. Epic morning style light all day long. Perfect snow. And I remember I went sledding and I was way over my head, just like hardly any sled skills, just getting stuck. I actually fell in a creek in the morning. It was like 20 below. My sled fully like jammed on the uphill side of a creek crossing and I fell backwards into the creek, standing in the water for like 5 minutes until they could get me out.
Oh man.
I was holding the snowmobile, like it was teetering above me and I was just holding up the back end so it didn't fall on me. And they pulled me out, but we ended up having an epic day. Dan got photo of the year that day with Bryn. And it was just like insanely good conditions, blower snow. And I sent a bunch of big cliffs when I wasn't getting stuck on my sled. And I remember Dan being like, geez, man, like, I think you pretty much won us over. You had soaking wet feet all day, -20, skied like badass lines all day and didn't even complain. Like you can come out with us anytime you want.
I mean, I would think that it's so embarrassing, almost like how your sled skills are if you're like standing in a creek that you almost have to send it harder just to get their respect after what you've shown them on the sled.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, that probably might have played a bit of a factor for sure. And not to mention, like, I know the level that Dan's at and how much I respected him. So when I'm on top of a line and he's just like down at the bottom, I remember hearing him yell, "Send it." When the slough was just pouring off this cliff, I couldn't see, and he just yelled, "Send it," from the top of his lungs. And I remember being like, okay, I guess it's time to send it. And I just launched it, and they were just so stoked, like hooting and hollering. And this is in the day, like we were in this epic zone where now you'd see tons of people. We didn't see a single person out that entire day. There was just like the 5 of us. And so, yeah, super special time, different era in skiing for sure. It's just not like that anymore.
I mean, I would think everywhere you go now, there's different crews and they have staked out areas where they're building jumps and it's every camp to themselves, but you see a shit ton of people.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I wouldn't say always you see a shit ton of people because the backcountry is massive. And when you're going into further remote zones and you're searching for like bigger tech lines, that's kind of like, not a lot of people are looking for that. But having said that, there is probably 5 times the amount of vehicles in the parking lot at the bottom, and so many people have sleds, and it definitely is a different situation.
And then thinking about summer camps at Whistler, were you like a digger or did you work at High North or did you get to get involved in that respect?
Yeah. First job was Momentum. Mike Douglas hired me on to be a coach, which was epic. That was like such a groundbreaking thing for me.
To get paid to coach kids and ski?
Oh, yeah. And I had been a High North camper before. When I was 17, right when I graduated, I went to the camp for 1 year for a week-long session. And then next thing I know, before I was even with TGR, Mike had faith in me to be a good coach, and he knew I was a good skier, and he invited me to be a coach, and then ended up doing a bunch of summers as well at High North for Zox. So did both camps, and just awesome memories.
And how important is that place to your trick vocabulary development? Because you started throwing a lot of shit in the backcountry, but are you learning a lot of that stuff in the summer and not really during the season, just when you're skiing the slushy stuff on the glacier?
Yeah, I was definitely taking it pretty seriously as far as training goes and just keeping on my skis, even just coaching. A lot of times I would just be just skiing around, hitting rails and skiing the pipe, and just constantly working on the little things that just kept my foundation super locked in. And, you know, I'm skiing Big Mountain all winter, so why not just shred pipe all summer? Because like there's so many technical aspects of half pipe skiing, like edge control and like pumping transitions and just being strong on your feet and balanced. And so I would always just work on that stuff, and not because it was like felt like a job, but just because I love all aspects of skiing, and all the freestyle roots that I have just made me want to just progress all levels of what it was.
And then what really puts you on the map in terms of skiing is, you know, you're taking your tricks to the big mountain contest scene and you're in the North American IFS Free Ski Championships. You win like the overall thing. How many comps were there? How did you do? And who was skiing in them with you?
Well, the first few years I was doing it, I was just doing the North American circuit stuff. So it'd be like the sort of the level below the world title kind of stuff where Hugo and those guys were skiing, because I was still kind of trying to get my bearings and get my training in, so to speak. So I did a few years of the IFSA North American stops, and then I was watching guys like Elan Skis, P.Y. LeBlanc, Hugo Harrison, just a bunch of guys, just like amazing skiers to be watching. And then eventually I did the whole North American circuit 1 year, which was I think 6 different stops. And that was the year right before I started filming with TGR. I was starting to get pretty locked into my skills in that arena, and ended up winning the tour that year.
And when you win the tour, I would think a lot of brands take notice. I mean, is this when sponsorship stuff kind of happens for you? Because I think you had a shop sponsor before that. But is this when brands come to you and they're like, hey, man, we see that you have this future and we want to be a part of it?
In a way, but I had to do the legwork on that because I was still just doing the North American stuff. The free skiing competitions back then were still quite obscure, you know? It's like not a huge audience. Nothing was on TV. There's no social media. So it was a totally different world. And so it was kind of just like a really core group of people that were competing. And so to me, I just saw it as training essentially. And that was the best training I could have ever gotten because you're skiing in such difficult conditions. And sometimes it was okay, but a lot of times it was very just difficult conditions and snow wise. And so I kind of had to do the legwork and I put it out there to a few companies, and then Dissent ended up sponsoring me. And I think it was just the year before that I won the North American Tour, which was great timing because when I had won the tour, they were like, oh, wow, like Dana's definitely doing stuff. And then Dissent was my foot in the door with TGR the very next year. Yeah, so that was it.
Well, it sounded like TGR kind of gave you the invite to Jackson and gave you almost the tryout, which they've done with like plenty of other people. I talked to McNutt and other people, and was that standard practice back then? Like they invite an athlete to Jackson, you have to prove yourself, and if you do well, that's where you're going to start your film career with them?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Yeah, so I had this demo tape that I had made from like my compiled footage that I had from a few different smaller film projects, and then I sent it to TGR, and they got it and watched it, and they're like, oh wow, like we like his style, like he can do tricks, he can ski big mountain, he's smooth, like we kind of want to work with this guy. And so they told Dissent that, because I had told them that I was with Dissent and they worked with TGR. But it's funny enough because they were talking with Dissent, the high up international, I was just on Dissent Canada, and they were like, oh, we don't even know who this is, like who are you talking about? And they're like, well, his name's Dana Flahr, and like we want to film with him. And they're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, send him an invite and we'll just see how it goes. And then I drove down there with Ryan Oakton, down to Jackson that winter. And it was a pretty bad snow year, but just kept at it. And eventually it snowed. We were there for weeks and weeks. It was only supposed to be a couple of weeks, but kept at it until the conditions got good. And then when the clouds cleared, I think I was starting to feel quite comfortable there by then, which was nice because I'd spent a while. And it was just epic conditions. And that first day I went out filming and got like 3 A+ shots that were like some of the best shots of my segment in the film that first day. And they emailed Dissent basically right away, and they're like, he's on fire, we're going to keep him here for like the rest of the year. And they're like, okay. Good talk.
I mean, leading up to that, when you're like heading down there with Ryan and you guys know that it's kind of like a tryout, are there nerves from you, like, or pressure? Do you realize that you have to send it? It's not like you can take it easy at all because it's like your one shot to make your career happen?
Well, it's funny. I didn't feel that way at all. Maybe because I was just comfortable in my skills, but I think it was more the fact that they knew Ryan Oakton because he had already filmed with Matchstick. So I believe there was probably a little bit more pressure on him because he sort of had a name, where I was just this guy, Dana, Ryan's buddy, who had never been in a major film, didn't barely have any sponsors that like were putting any money. I didn't have any financial support whatsoever, just a few pairs of free skis. And so I was just the kind of the guy that tagging along. So I didn't feel any pressure at all. And I was just there having so much fun, just like absorbing this epic experience of being in this resort. And I think that allowed me to just be really loose and relaxed about it, and allowed me to just like pull off some of the best skiing I think I'd ever done in my life up to that day.
I mean, you had that line with the huge Misty 7 in the backcountry, and is that something that you had done before, or is it something that you did to make an impact with those dudes there in Jackson?
I had never done that before. I'd been doing tons of Misty 7s, and that was the most technical trick that I was super comfortable with, that I could put to my feet nearly every time if the conditions were right. And I knew that's where I wanted to take my skiing, to be able to throw those types of tricks off big cliffs in natural terrain. But not just natural, but like I wanted to make it like a big stamp by doing it off something pretty big, like a 50-foot cliff kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then when I saw this one cliff, it was just like stuck out to me. The takeoff looked really nice because I spin left and it was a bit on a rightward angle. So I knew I could use my downhill left ski edge to kind of set the trick. And I just had been staring at it and I was like, oh, okay. I think this is going to have to happen today. Like the conditions are absolutely perfect. Todd Jones was out there filming with us, who's one of TGR's best cinematographers, and everything just lined up really well. And I actually hit it once first and something didn't quite feel right on takeoff. So I didn't actually set the trick. I just did a straight air. And that was the shot where I actually landed, came out of my cloud, and almost hit a person that was on the traverse below.
Okay.
Super close. I was literally 2 inches from like hitting this person full on. And that was in the film. And I remember just people gasping because it was such a close call. And I think my intuition had kicked in there. And if I had tried that trick, it might not have worked out as well. But then I was like, Todd, I want to go back up and hit it again. So I had no skins or anything. I was on downhill bindings, took my skis off, boot packed all the way up to a broke trail. And then I skied down and everything felt right. And I did the Misty 7.
What's the reaction when you get down? I mean, are those guys almost shitting their pants? Like, holy shit, this is like a new era for us?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, they were like, holy. And I didn't really see it at the time. I kind of maybe watching the behind the scenes footage later, I saw the reactions, but I was just in such a zone that I kind of blocked out everything around me at the time. I remember basically not even talking all day. I think I felt the nerves, but I knew the potential of what could become of that day. So I think I was just quite in the zone. But yeah, they were just pretty much ecstatic overall with when the footage came back, especially.
And while I'm sure you know you're skiing well, do you have any idea how you stack up against everyone else in Tangerine Dream?
Not really. I mean, I knew I was doing things on skis that no one was really doing. Seth Morrison was doing it kind of like he was definitely doing it. He was the guy, not kind of, like fully doing it. He had been doing like rodeo sevens off cliffs in the front line, I think it was. But other than Seth, there was no one really doing it. So I think I kind of knew that I was like really pushing it, but I knew that's what I was focused on. And by the time the movie came out, I was just happy that I had kind of just made it happen. And I was just like, wow, I just made my dream become a reality. This is trippy.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm starting this out with outdoor research. First and foremost, when I signed on with OR, I knew there wasn't an outerwear brand on the market that performs as well as what OR has been putting out in the marketplace for over 40 years. That's what happens when you test your gear in the absolutely terrible, soggy conditions that we can get here in the Pacific Northwest. As we all know, days in the mountains are always more fun when you're warm and dry, and that's what people trust OR to deliver time after time. I'll tell you, on cold days, I live in my men's Snow Crew down jacket. This is hands down the warmest jacket I've ever owned. And for those standard Northwest days, I rock the Snow Crew jacket and pant, which keeps me comfortable. And it's one of those fits where if you don't see me ski, I look like a pro. Really, what's rad about OR is the style that they've been bringing to the table lately. While mountaineers have always sworn by OR's quality and performance, now athletes like legend Mark Abma, world champion Troy Podmilsack, and X Games gold medalist Zoe Atkin are making OR gear look cooler than ever. I've been loving OR products since I first bought my outdoor research rain jacket when I moved to Seattle in 2000. And I know you will too. If you want to be warm and dry and look cool this season, head on over to outdoorresearch.com and see what I'm talking about. My final sponsor is Best Day Brewing. And with snow season right around the corner, skiers, snowboarders, weekend warriors, tubers, sledders, snowbikers, snowmobilers, you get it. The doers of winter are starting to get ready to shred. And post-shred, it's all about après. And this year, do après right. Forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, and forget about getting in trouble on the way home. Because with a beer from Best Day Brewing, you know you'll get all the flavor of your favorite beer without the alcohol. Whether it be the West Coast IPA, a hazy IPA, a Kolsch, the Electro Lime, or my new favorite flavor, the Natural Pills, you won't have to worry about anything but having your best day ever when you have a best day. Blind taste tests prove that you won't be able to taste the difference between your favorite beer and a best day. I mean, the only difference you'll notice is how good you feel in the morning, and you're going to remember what you did last night, which is almost as refreshing as a best day. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day, or you can always buy some on Amazon or at bestdaybrewing.com, and you can thank me later. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When Powder Awards comes out in like 2006, or it comes around in 2006, they want you there. Do they give you a call with a hint like you might want to be at this award show this year?
Yeah, pretty much. They basically sent me an invite in the mail, a little postcard that said Powder Awards. And I think maybe they followed up with a phone call and was like, yeah, you should probably come. And I was like, okay, yeah, sounds good. I'll be there. So it's definitely a bit of a hint, I think. And then sure enough, I went and won the breakthrough performance.
And when you go to an award show like that, I mean, is everything surreal? Because you're like a 20-year-old kid all of your heroes are there. Are you almost like starstruck and blown away at the same time?
Yeah, it was definitely pretty surreal. It was like, all the lights and the cameras are all out. And like, it was even more surreal for me in a way because I had actually blown my knee earlier that year and I was pretty bummed out. I was missing the entire winter after that breakthrough ski season. And I had all of a sudden signed with North Face and Oakley, and I was all bummed because it was snowing out, and it was just like, oh my God, I've never missed a season before. And then I'd gone to Costa Rica for about 3 weeks, and I flew back from Costa Rica just to go to the awards. So it was even more of a culture shock because I had just been like sitting at the beach, just trying to not think of skiing. And then next thing you know, I'm at this award show, and it's just like lights, camera, action. Every skier that's legendary at the time is there. And next thing you know, I'm on stage with the microphone, like giving a thank you speech. It was pretty incredible.
When you talk about blowing your knee, was that the thing that happened at Festival?
Yeah, exactly. I was doing a silly wall ride competition. The competition itself wasn't silly. It was silly for me to be there doing that. I should have just been watching everyone else just enjoying my moment and just taking it easy because I'm not really a park skier anymore at that point, but I just love skiing so much anyways. So I was up there hitting the wall ride with everybody and took a bad fall off the top of it and ended up doing a full ACL tear.
And is that something that just devastates you because you've started your career? TGR is all behind you. Dina Star's behind you. Said the North Face, Oakley, everything's happening. And then you blow your knee. Is it like, oh my God, I might lose all of this?
Oh, it was crushing. Like, words can't even describe how crushed I was. I'd never been injured before. And next thing you know, my knee just completely buckled underneath me as I was trying to walk away from crashing. And it just completely buckled and I fell to my face. It was the most sobering, shocking, and depressing moment of my life, I would have to say.
Well, you're able to get through that. The next thing I'm going to talk about is Tanner Hall. How do you meet him for the first time, and how do you get invited to be part of the Massive?
I think I met Tanner a bunch of times just at Festival because I think he was going there. And we did that rail jam that year that I blew my knee and stuff. He was just watching with Seth on the sidelines, which was smart. That's kind of why I regretted what I did. But either way, kind of just got to know Tanner over the years. He's just kind of like a really rooted guy that's kind of like pretty humble, down to earth, to just chat with you. And if he knows you love skiing, like he'll just have all the time in the day to talk with you. And before I was really anybody famous in the ski world, I knew him. And Kai Peterson and Tanner were very good friends. They had been filming a long time since Kai was a kid. And then Kai always spoke really highly of myself and Ian Macintosh. And basically Tanner was just like, should we pick up like new skiers this year? And I think Kai was like, yeah, Ian and Dana, like those guys are on fire right now. You should try to get them to film with you in your movie. And he was in Whistler one summer and Tanner's like, Dana, like I want you to film with me for this next film. And that was after Believe had come out. And Believe just blew the doors off of ski movies, in my opinion. It was just such a soulful, epic ski film. And Tanner was just on his game and just doing the most incredible skiing, him and Seth, and so inspiring to watch. And so when he approached me, I was like, yeah, I'll ski and film with you 100%.
And do you go to AK with Tanner and the Massive first, or do you go with TGR first?
I'd been AK with TGR multiple times before already at that point. And then when we were filming for the Massive, I ended up going to a couple trips with him. I went to Terrace. Tanner was hurt for that one, so it was just me and Ian skiing in Terrace. Then I got the invite to fill in Haines for the end of the season after basically my TGR leg of the trip had been over and I was already still up in Haines. And then they're like, okay, Dana, let's stick around. We're going to film for like 3 more weeks up here for the Massive. So I was up there like 6 weeks total.
And when you think about being in Alaska, when you're standing on top of one of those blind rollovers, what goes through your head? I mean, is it nerves every single time?
Pretty much, yeah. Nerves every single time. Alaska is a very unforgiving place. And so you have to just be fully humble and fully present and fully aware of your skills and your mindset and just being very like cautious and giving the mountains full respect because obviously it's just a dangerous place to be. And with the helicopters as well, it makes it really real. And just going to have to learn how to be very just delicate in your movements physically and mentally.
And then I also heard about one, I mean, I don't know which massive trip it was, but it sounded like you were on a trip, everyone got hurt, and you had a shit ton of heli time solo almost. That happen, or is that just a rumor that I heard?
Oh, no, that's fully true. I was fully solo, pretty much unlimited heli time. I was with Tanner for that massive shoot, and we were in Haines. I had just done 3 weeks with TGR up there, had one of the best heli trips of my life. I was skiing the best I've ever skied in my life, for sure. Skiing lines I'd only dream of. Spine lines, and the stability and the weather was pretty much perfect. Skiing mind-blowing lines you only dream about. Pushing myself further than I ever had. And then Tanner tweaked his ankle really hard for the second or third time that season. And it was just the two of us at the point. And then next thing you know, it was just me and a full film crew. And we had this heli. And so it was just like sunny every day. And it was just like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to be carrying this ship onward myself.
When you have like a life like that, or like a trip like that, where you're the guy and every run is focused on you, is it just like adrenaline overload where every day when you're done, you're just fucking totally fried?
Yeah, for sure. I was like, and I was used to it at that point. It's pretty frying overall, especially after like a multiple day sunny streak, high pressure where you're filming big lines for a bunch of days in a row. But you're usually with 3 other athletes. So there's 4 of you. And if you're just feeling mellow one day or for a couple hours, you just take the easy line. But there's like, I was the guy, the only one. So it was intense. Like I handled it fine, but it took its toll a bit later because I was so burnt later on. But yeah, it was basically like everything was on me. And I was just like, holy, okay. Like just studying lines at night at the hotel, but like living like a monk pretty much, because it's just like so overwhelming. You just go to your hotel room at the end of the day, just try to rest and meditate a bit and relax and just study lines of what you're going to be skiing the next day. And it was just all a big blur. It was pretty wild.
And then I think it was that trip, but I'm not 100% sure, but I think you had Tom Burt as your guide, and he's an absolute legend, badass mountain man. And you learn different things from a guide on a snowboard compared to a ski guide? And like, do they read terrain differently, or is it all the same?
I wouldn't say it's all the same. You know, in an arena like Alaska, it's pretty similar because you're kind of looking for similar stuff. And it was great with having Tom Burt there because he was such a great guy and we got along so well. And he really tuned into what we were looking for. And he had such good knowledge of the terrain there that he brought us to some of the most epic lines that I've skied. And I remember one of them was probably the most technical spine line I've ever skied. And it started on this like knife edge ridge. And it was just super sharp spines, just pretty much like chiseling down these things. Like you're not like making turns. It was just like chiseling down these faces. And I didn't have any other athletes to bounce ideas off or watch someone drop in or get them to ride their line and then ask them how the sloughs are rolling. There were so many aspects that were like, holy. But Tom was like having another rider there. And Tom was going to the top of these lines with me. And this one line had a really difficult sort of like entrance. It was really hard to see because every little notch on the spine wall along the bottom of the ridge where I was dropping looked the same. And he did me a favor and shredded down the ridge line a bit and then stood above the spine that I needed to get onto. And so he basically like was kind of like my landmark. And that one stands out a lot for me because without him there, it's such a demanding line and the conditions were starting to get a little toasty, so the runouts were getting crusty, and it was just such a tech line, and he gave me so much confidence for it. So super grateful for having Tom around.
So he's a badass guide, and it sounds like you're on another trip. I think it was a massive trip that you mentioned with Terrace with Ian, and you had some kind of more green guides that hadn't worked with pro skiers before. What happens on a day like that?
That's right. I kind of had forgotten about that. Yeah, that was a bit easier to go through in a sense because it was sort of more midwinter conditions. It had snowed a lot, tons of fresh snow. We were being really cautious. We were sort of like skiing not the most insanely difficult terrain, playing it fairly safe. And the guides that we had were fairly green. So you could sort of tell that they were very cautious and quite nervous to have us out there because that avalanche danger was a little questionable. So we were playing it pretty safe. But as far as experience, like kind of guides that are more green, a novice versus a guy like Tom, it's night and day. I don't think there's any way having a guide with a lower level of experience in a place like Alaska, skiing those big lines. I don't see really how they could really be much of service other than just to help with a rescue, essentially, if anything were to go down. Not to disrespect them, but we would have had way more experience than them in that type of arena. So yeah, very big difference.
And, shit happens in the mountains. And while a lot of it's great, people dying is the worst. And it sucks to lose anyone. I know you've lost a lot of people. Everybody in the mountains has. But have you lost someone who's really, really close to you? And how do you deal with that kind of shit?
Well, yeah, I've been starting to count. Well, several years ago, I was trying to count on both hands how many people I've known that have died in my life. Not all in the mountains, but I stopped counting once I got to 20, I think it was.
Holy shit.
It keeps going up still. It's still happening. And I've never really lost anyone that's been very super close with me, but many, many, many acquaintances and friends over the years. Eric Roner is definitely a standout. It was the two of us that were basically hanging out all winter long. One of the first years, probably the first year that I filmed with TGR, after Ryan Oakton ended up going on a few side trips and I stuck around Jackson, and it was just me and Roner, and they put us up in a hotel and we just like hung out and skied every day and just like basically we're just like ski buddies for like 2 months straight. And that was definitely a big loss.
Yeah, that was a huge loss. And, with other losses that happen in the mountains, when you think of those things happening and you're out there in big terrain, do you think about that kind of stuff, or do you have to kind of compartmentalize that stuff, not think about it at all and just focus on your mission, or does it creep into your head?
I don't really think about that stuff. I think I'm so used to just like learning to just hone in on what is most important in that moment and hyper focusing on the task at hand, that I've gotten good at not letting distractions kind of creep in. But I think naturally as you get a bit older, you start to become a little bit more aware of the dangers and whatnot. But yeah, overall, when you're out in the mountains, it's more just focus on the most important things, like breathing, staying calm, reading the snow, listening to the mountains, and not letting those other things kind of come into your head.
And then when I think of rad trips that you went on, I mean, there was the Petersburg trip that you went, which like such an epic crew. There's Todd Jones, Seth Morrison, Ian Macintosh, Sage is there. When you're on a trip with heavy hitters like that, what's the vibe?
Oh, it's great. We're all kind of on the same wavelength. We're all there to do the same thing. We all get along really well. No drama. We all respect each other greatly. And we know that we're in very big mountains that also deserve respect. So it's a very like professional atmosphere and focused, and just like incredible memories from those kind of trips. Did many, many, many trips with Sage, many, many trips with Morrison. And those guys are just such professionals, and to be able to kind of stand alongside them and sort of like kind of be in that frequency is just a incredible thing to have experienced.
That trip I don't think totally worked out for you because I think there was an injury at the end of it. Todd described that place as prehistoric. Was it some of the most unique terrain that you've been to, or what is the coolest and most insane place that you've been?
That place was definitely pretty cool. It was probably the most intimidating place I had been to in Alaska for sure, because just massive rock walls. The Devil's Thumb is there. It's like a big kind of like spiky, jagged rock peak. Just crazy, intimidating looking terrain. Not to mention, apparently there's like an old native village that got taken out by a landslide a long time ago. So, I feel like there's a bit of a spiritual aspect to some of the tragedies that have happened there, over time. But I think as far as the most epic, unique place would be the Tordrillos in Alaska. That was pretty darn cool and had that very kind of prehistoric feel with just massive mountains and so much endless exploratory potential.
Was Mike Overcast there when you were there?
Yeah, I believe he was. Yep.
Whenever I think of the Tordrillos, I think of that dude. Anyway, we can talk about the great trips, but there's also bad stuff. When you think about your gnarliest crash in your history, what's that?
Oh, I would have to say when I was in Petersburg, I was coming out of a line quick through the crux, and I had passed the sketchiest part of the line. I was kind of just a bit excited to be on the home free, and I just had a cliff to hit to finish the line off, and I just took it way too fast. I got a bit too excited, and I knew the landing was super steep and long. Took it way too big and kind of just bounced on the landing because of the impact, and I tumbled really hard. Ski didn't come off, and I totally blew my left knee in the middle of a tomahawk, and I was just tumbling and came to a stop, and my knee was fully blown. No pain. It was just the ACL was gone. I knew it right away. And that was a bad wreck and a pretty bad place to fall, in the sense that I was still way up on the slope and I still had to get down with one leg, and I had to ski down the rest of the way. I took the ski off, ski down on my good leg with my ski in my hand. And then I was trying to get down to the helicopter, but I still had to cross over the bergschrund.
Okay, so you have to like gap it?
Yeah, so I had to try to like gap the little bit of a bergschrund, and you're trying to get across the crack basically and not fall in a hole. And it was definitely a bit of an intimidating thing to have to do, but I didn't really have much of a choice. So I found the spot where I thought would be the best place to cross. Took a tiny bit of speed into it, as much as I could with one leg and a blown knee, and didn't quite make it across far enough. And when I landed, the snow just disintegrated under my foot, and I fell straight into the crack and about 12 feet down into the hole.
Oh no.
It was horrible.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a blown knee. They have to come extract you from the hole?
Yeah, well, they were trying to do that. The snow is super deep, and the guide at the time sort of like made a couple bad decisions in the process of trying to get up to me with wrangling up what equipment he was going to take. And so it was taking him a while. And luckily I had landed on a snow bridge down below.
Okay.
I was like 12 feet down or so, 10, 12 feet. And I landed perfectly on this bridge of snow, like a mound of snow on my good leg perfectly. And I radioed them and I was like, hey, I'm totally okay. I'm standing on a snow bridge right now. And they're like, okay, oh my God, like we thought you were dead. Like, okay, that's good. We're trying to get up to you, but it's taking a while because our guide had to throw his split board together and throw skins on and skin up to the hole to pull me out with a rope. And that was taking forever because you know how split boards are. It takes a bit of time to get it all set up.
Yep.
Anyway, so I was like, okay, well, that's all good. I'm fine. I have my ski in my hand and I have a bit of a wall of snow. I could probably just try to get myself up and chisel away at getting out of here on my own. So I'll radio back to you in a few minutes and just let you know how it's going. And eventually I just used my one ski with both my hands, both my arms, and just like chiseled myself up the wall and one leg, and used the edge of my ski that I had on my foot to hold myself up. And I just slowly over like the course of like 10 or 15 minutes chiseled myself all the way out of this hole and got out on my own.
Well, that's the bad of the whole trip. The good is that you had a great season, and I think you're doing double duty with TGR and the Massive. I could be wrong, but I don't know. From my research, it seemed like you're doing that. And you had the closing segment for Under the Influence. That's like the highest honor that you can get in a ski movie. Do you know that you're going to get closing segment, or is that something you find out at the premiere?
I think I had found out that I had the closer on my way to the premiere. I was at the airport, and I think someone had told Ian that I had the closing segment, and he told me. And we were chilling out at the airport, and he told me, and I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. I was pretty darn excited.
When you think of your best segment, would it be the Under the Influence segment? Would it be Light the Wick? What was your personal favorite?
I think my personal favorite would have been Light the Wick, I believe.
I think you had opener there, right?
Yeah, that was my opening segment that I had. That was the one opener I had. And the Under Influence is special to me because it's full of just epic Alaska footage. And that was the same year that I got like a full segment in Tanner's movie. So, you know, very few people get to have that much footage out in the movies in one season. But the Light the Wick was special because almost the entire segment was filmed in the Pemberton backcountry via my snowmobile. And I was skiing, you know, some of the best lines, biggest airs, tricks that I had sort of ever done up until that point. And that was without the use of a helicopter. So I think that one stands out.
And when you think about that time and what you were skiing on, I mean, you had made the shift to Atomic at this point. You're skiing on the bent Chetler. And is that ski like a game-changing thing where you're skiing your best, but is the ski also helping you ski better than ever before?
Yes, that was my first year on Atomic, I believe, or maybe second. But the Ben Shetler was great, and that I was pretty stoked on that ski. But with my skiing style, I think I was skiing the Atlas a fair bit, which has a bit of a flatter tail and a little bit more geared towards like just sort of high speed, big mountain skiing.
Yeah, like you're not landing switch that much.
Yeah, exactly. Not really much of a backcountry freestyler, more like big mountain with a bit of freestyle mixed in. And
Yep.
so I was definitely loving the Ben Shetler. It was great. And I think some of the technical kind of skiing, really steep tech stuff was made easier with that Ben Shetler because of just like the kind of the butter, just the reverse camber aspect to it.
Yeah.
But I think they had a ski called the Atlas, which I skied on a fair bit too. And that thing had just a really nice traditional, more of a straight tail. And it was so stable. You could ski it super fast and be just super, super stable on it. And so I think the combination of those two skis that year were pretty instrumental.
And everything that you were doing in that was gigantic. And then on the smaller features that were still huge, you were tricking off of all of them. And it was pretty crazy. You end up with the Full Throttle Award. And for that one, as an athlete, is that almost the most important award you can get at Powder Awards?
I think that was probably my most proud moment. Yeah, like the Full Throttle. It's kind of the award that's given to the one that's like pushing it the hardest and like trying to like push the envelope the most. And to be able to do that is always the goal, but to find the line of being within your ability and comfort level and balancing the push to the progression side of things with both aspects, I think that one definitely has, I think, the most pride and most notoriety involved with it for sure.
And while we've talked about awards and you've had a few, one of the biggest honors I would think in skiing is getting a Powder magazine cover. You got yours in October 2015. And which is more important for you, like a movie award or having that cover that'll last forever?
The cover was definitely pretty cool, but for me, a movie award hands down takes the cake. The amount of effort and work you have to put into to be recognized on a big screen in the ski world, it takes a lifetime of honing your craft. And not to take anything away from people getting magazine covers, but you could go out, maybe do 2 or 3 days of stills in a year with the right photographer and the right lighting conditions and make some one-turn wonder kind of things and get amazing photos. And it's so different. You can spend an entire lifetime becoming one of the best skiers in the world, and to have it all come together and have a 3-minute segment in a ski film and be recognized for that, you can't really replace that.
There's no ski acting in your segment, but there could be in a cover shot.
Yeah, exactly. And I respect still photography as well, just as much. I've done lots of it, but there is an element of acting to it. And you're kind of just working it for the camera, where in the film world, you're out there pushing the level of the sport, hands down. And you're skiing some of the most dangerous, life-threatening terrain. And you're pushing the levels of what the levels of the sport have been in the past and what they may currently be when that movie comes out. And so you're always on the cutting edge of progression and showing people what's possible on skis. And that's something I'll be proud of for the rest of my life.
And when you think of that powder cover that you have, it sounds like it all just like came together in a day and you just like went out and shot with a dude you'd never shot with before, got a photo, and boom, you got your cover.
Yeah, I mean, I think the powder cover, the first one, I've had a couple now. The first one was with Blake Jorgensen, who we actually go pretty far back because he's from Whistler as well.
Yes, I'm talking about the other one, I guess. But yes.
Yeah.
The one you were in Europe and they were like, hey, come over here. We got a day.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that was with Oscar and Ander in Engelberg. Yeah, that was like kind of right time, right place. Called him up. I was in the neighborhood nearby. I was in Zermatt, and he invited me. And yeah, we ended up working together, and we got great conditions. And he was a dream to work with. And he knows the mountain like the back of his hand. And we just got these epic photos. And that was a really cool trip.
Okay, and now based on time, I'm going to fast forward a little bit to the kind of the end of proness. And it sounds like when you were filming for Paradise Waits, that you were almost over it. Was there like any burnout or something that happened? Or like, can you explain what was going through your mind around that point in your career?
Yeah, I think there was definitely a bit of burnout for sure. Was probably feeling a bit just like maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years straight of filming and taking heavy risks and being in helicopters and having a couple extremely close calls starts to take its toll on you. And when you don't really take a break, you're just going and going and going. You don't really deal with the stuff that you need to sort of like maybe relax for a bit, take a moment. Don't really do that. And I think I was just sort of getting a bit burnt out from things, and definitely a bit of PTSD from a few super close calls, including falling into that hole. I could easily died that day if I'd have not actually landed on my good leg in that hole. So a couple of super close calls, and it kind of just changes your whole mentality and just fries you a little bit.
So when you're on trips, are you almost pulling back a little bit, not sending it as hard? And it sounded like you're playing guitar and doing a lot of art, but not really sending it like everybody knew that you could.
Yeah, exactly. I think the first couple trips after that event where I fell in the hole, that next Alaska trip was pretty bad conditions as well. The next couple Alaska trips I had. So it was like you had to be really like strong minded and strong on your feet, and the conditions weren't great. And, after having those bit of PTSD from a few years of close calls, definitely was like not into taking the risks. And I know how to listen to myself, and I know when to listen to myself, and I know when to pull back. And I started just pulling back a bit and just being like, yeah, no, not feeling it. I'm going to take the easy line over here. And, I could tell that people are like, huh? Like, that's not the Dana we know. Like,
yeah.
It was just like, I just had to do what I had to do.
And does age play into that too? As you get older and more mature, does the risk and fear get more real?
I think it probably does. But I think at that point, I was still young enough and confident enough in my abilities that it wasn't really necessarily age. It was just like close calls. They shake you to the core, and it changes really everything. Totally just changes you.
Does the end happen because maybe Atomic reaches out to TGR and wonders why you didn't have the segment that they're expecting? And they're pretty much just like, well, he just isn't feeling it like he used to. Is that kind of how things end?
Yeah, probably. Hard to say because I wouldn't have been on the receiving end of that conversation. But I would say that's probably how it goes to a certain degree. And not to disrespect anybody, but like in the ski world and the action sports world, to a certain degree, by nature, it is quite unsustainable because essentially the companies are looking for the next youngest, craziest, most skilled person to take the older guy's spot. So it's a bit unsustainable by nature. So they're kind of like excited to replace you if you're not really, really pushing it to the same degree that you always have been. So it's just like one thing leads to another, and that's it.
And then, just like Kaiser Sose, poof, you were gone. And you disappeared into the background. And at this point in the show, that's the body of our podcast. And you're going to get to speak to poofing and disappearing in a minute in this part that I call Inappropriate Questions. Because my next segment is where I get someone that you know very well to ask you 3 questions. And I was able to get a legend of TGR, a guy who's been in like 20 different TGR movies. He's a tank and a dude that was raised to be in the backcountry. I'm talking about your former North Face and Atomic teammate, Ian Macintosh. And are you ready for question number 1 from Ian?
Sure. Go for it.
Yeah. So, Dana, I'm curious, where have you been and what have you been up to since leaving the pro ski world?
Oh, just pretty much laying low, living in Pemberton, skiing for myself, working, staying grounded, trying to stay humble, trying to learn about life, trying to learn about nature, trying to just be a better human being, be a better person to my family, be a better partner to my girlfriend, and just learning all those things in life that you kind of neglect when you're running around the world as a professional athlete, chasing an adrenaline dream sort of thing. So enjoying it and thoroughly learning a lot about life in general, and just taking care of myself, staying grounded, and just enjoying a life that's not so dangerous and not so stressful, I would have to say.
And, you risked your life so much over your ski career, and now you say you're in Pemberton. Did skiing provide, like, enough to where you could buy a house and actually have enough, like, things where maybe you have to work now, but it's not like you have to slave away to pay the bills?
Yeah, I mean, skiing definitely did pay well over the years as I was doing it. But, I mean, where I live, it's quite expensive. And, I did get ahead a little bit, but didn't end up buying a fancy $1 million house in Whistler, that's for sure.
But did you buy a place in Pemberton?
No, I don't own a house there. Just still renting. But no, it's just been part of the process of just like growing up. I didn't really have a lot of like even just financial savvy and just, skiing has always been everything to me, and the money or whatever, the freedom, it was always secondary. And so I kind of was just happy to just ski and just put away some of my cash. But, I was living kind of like the punk rock way, like live fast, die young sort of thing, and not to be grim about it. But I was living for every day, day to day. I didn't plan ahead for a month away. I didn't plan ahead for 5 years away. And so I was just living day to day, and that's just been my life, and that's been the way it has been. And like, I can't say I have any regrets though. And I love life now more than I ever have. And I'm just grateful to have come out the other side after all the close calls, and just happy to be alive and experiencing almost like a secondary life in general.
Yeah, it's like 2.0. You got the pro ski career out of the way and not totally unscathed, but you're alive and you're well, and that's all you need to be. Here's question number 2 from Ian.
What's your passion for skiing these days? I'm curious to hear if you still really love the sport.
My passion's still as strong as ever, really. Maybe it was at its very peak, let's say high school years, when I was discovering how much I loved it. But my passion for skiing is still fully there. I ski almost every single day I can, especially if the snow conditions are good. And on powder days, I'm at the lift at 7 a.m. lined up within the first 100 people. I love it just as much as ever. There's something special about being in the mountains, just nature in general. But when you're in the mountains in the snow skiing with people you love, that's just taking it up to a whole other experience that very few people probably get to enjoy in their lives. So I'm still very much passionate about it, as I always have.
Well, it's awesome you were able to get over any burnout that you have, and it's still like the thing that drives you to just be alive. We're going to go to your final inappropriate question. This one is, I think, inappropriate or more inappropriate than the ones that you've gotten, but it's kind of cryptic at the same time. So here we go.
Tell me, Dana, how do you feel about pork?
Oh, that's funny. I mean, pork. I did hear from my other good friend, Shane Treat, that Ian as well does not eat pork, and neither do I. And I can't say I enjoy it. I actually avoid it at all costs, and it makes me nauseous just like looking at a slimy bag of bacon in the grocery store when I'm shopping. So that's how I feel about it. Not into it. And there's something just creepy about pork, if you ask me. I don't know. Eating pigs, there's just something dirty and weird about it. That's about all.
Was there any substance or potion that made you feel that way? Because I feel like he was kind of going that way with his question.
What do you mean by that?
Like ayahuasca?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I know people that drink ayahuasca. I think they're not allowed to eat pork. But it's interesting because in the old scriptures, it actually says clear as day to avoid pork at all costs. And there is an interesting thing with if you look at a pig's DNA, it is the most similar to human beings out of any animal. It's very strange that our pig DNA is so similar to human DNA. And there's something to be said about the fact that they tell you not to eat it in the scriptures. And a lot of ancient cultures also refuse to eat it. And just to throw it out there too, the last few times I did eat pork, it was sort of by accident, but I was like, oh, whatever. Like, I know I don't like it, but I ordered a bacon and cheese croissant by accident instead of just a cheese. I'll just eat it. I got the most insane nightmares, and I was like, what in the hell? And then it happened again.
Huh.
Same thing. Just crazy nightmares. Just, I can't even remember what they were, and I never get nightmares. And it was 2 times in a row. I was like, yeah, that's probably not a coincidence. I think I'm done.
All right. So that's Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast. And when I think about how you came up in the snow game, it's like your mom sacrificed so much so you and your brother could ski, and you started late. And then on top of that, it sounds like you're more introverted compared to most pro skiers. So you're not the guy saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. And most people with that combination don't go on to getting fully sponsored, traveling the world, and winning full throttle awards. But you were always focused on the goal, you weren't a party guy, and you wanted it more than everyone else. And even though the chips were always stacked against you, you still went all in and won. And then, like, the minute your passion started to waver, 15 or so years later, you disappeared off into the sunset. And, well, I'm glad you're still super passionate about skiing. I'm glad that you were able to give us this time and tell us your story. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. Yeah, like I said, you're really good at what you do, and like, I wish you the best of luck. Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. It's been awesome.
So that was time with Dana Flahr, and what an interesting story. I don't have too many people that come on the show and pretty much say that they were over the risk of pro skiing and they called it during their career. I mean, some people ride it out after they no longer have it, but that wasn't Dana. He was just burnt out from the stress and risk of putting his life on the line every season. I get that happening when you're older, but Dana wasn't that old. I mean, his peers from that era are still doing it. But more power to Dana. He skis for himself these days, and he seems to be living the life he wants. Just not the one that ski fans and other athletes may want him to live. I respect that, though. That's the podcast. At this point, please review me wherever you listen, subscribe to the podcast while you're at it, and please, please, please support my incredible sponsors who I need more than ever. They are Outdoor Research, Elan Skis, Thermic and Dissent, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.